What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Hungaroring edition of How to F1. So I'm just going to come right out and say it. Ever since the week kicked off, I arrived at the Hungaroring on the struggle bus and haven't gotten off of it yet. So with that in mind, the lap time that I laid down isn't exactly going to be anything flashy, but I wanted to get something out there for everybody to work on, because there are definitely some tints to find, even with the iRacing default setup, which is what I use to set up this lap time. I can tell you that the iRacing setup is not the limiting factor, because I've tried with a couple other setups, and I'm running about the same lap time, so it's definitely a me problem. That said, this should get you relatively in the ballpark, so unless you're trying to run for the pointy end of the top split broadcast race, this lap time should be relatively competitive, especially if you're one of those people that this guide is intended for, the non-alien racing an F1 car. And truthfully, at the end of the day, I don't feel like outright lap times are going to be hugely important, especially if you're not in the top split broadcast race, because this track is eating tires. But I'll go into tire strategy a little bit later. Right now, I'm going to get into one thing that I wanted to talk about as a tip, and then we'll get into the hot lap, and then finally I'll discuss tire strategy. Alright, so the tip that I wanted to discuss is going to have to do with race starts. Like in real life, the iRacing Grand Prix series uses standing starts, so you'll have red lights appear on the screen, and then once they turn green, everybody takes off at the same time. There's no formation lap, no pace laps, or anything like that. Now, as many people know, and as you may know, this car has a lot of power, has a lot of torque, and standing starts can be kind of dangerous if you don't work on them and practice them. There are several different techniques for getting off the line and getting going pretty quickly without causing too much trouble. One method is using your brakes, holding the brake and giving it a little bit of throttle right before the lights go green. And then once those lights do come up green, you let out of the brake, ease into the throttle, try to avoid wheel spin as much as possible, and you're good to go. The method that I used for the longest time involved just controlling the clutch pedal, figuring out where the bite point was on the clutch, figuring out about how much throttle I needed to get a safe getaway, and then just manipulate the two. So once the lights would go green, I would pull the clutch back, or out I guess, to about 50-60%, while also giving about 50% throttle, and then slowly transition between the two like you would in a normal street car. The last method is a little bit more advanced, and generally I think the only people that typically use it are those that have like the very special Formula style rims. You can use this technique, however, even if you don't have those fancy devices, and that is having a dual clutch input. Essentially, you set one of your paddles, or your clutch pedal, your button, or whatever. You assign your clutch to one paddle and set the bite point either in the software or within iRacing using the joy-calib YAML file. Set a bite point to whatever you decide to be the correct bite point for this car. I think generally most people set it to about 50 or 60, depending on, some guys change it track per track. I generally leave it the same no matter wherever we go. And then assigning a different input for your second clutch in the options menu. Generally, my technique now is I have a button that's mapped to my steering wheel for second clutch, and then my clutch pedal is mapped as the main clutch, I guess if you will. The main clutch is set to only go to 60% with the pedal fully engaged, and then the second clutch button goes 100%. Lights go green, I drop the clutch button, but still maintain my foot on the clutch pedal as I roll away from the line. And then as the speed increases, I transition between the throttle and the clutch pedal like in a street car. No matter which technique you decide to use to get off the line, make sure that you practice it very thoroughly, you practice it often, get really comfortable with it, and get safe with it. You don't want to go barreling off into turn 1 like Valtteri Bottas did this year. Alright, so we're coming out of the last corner here. Across the start finish line. Unfortunately, we're missing a few brake markers, so it's a good guess, but you want to hit it right before this line right here. Drag the brake, trail off as you get to the apex, and then get back on it. And get back on the throttle. I brake right about here at the strip. Try to keep it tight to the left, then come back across here. If you hit this right, you can hit it wide open, but the safest manner is to hit it and let off the gas just a little bit. You want to kind of catch that curve there to the left, and then kind of just slowly roll through this section here. This section is going to catch people out. You got the chicane here. Be careful going too far over one side or the other, because you'll at the very least get an off track, or you'll even get a slowdown penalty. There are lots of off tracks here on this track. Here's one to the left. If you go too far left, you'll get another slowdown. And then off too far to the left here, you'll also get an off track. Same thing through this corner. You go too far left, you'll get an off track. There's a couple ways to attack this. You can keep it tight to the left. I've also found a little bit of speed taking a late apex and getting a straighter exit both in this corner as well as this one, this last corner. And here you go, a lap at the Hungaroring. Alright, so the last thing I wanted to discuss for this video is going to be tire strategy. Currently, right now it seems to be a little bit up in the air as far as the community is concerned. We were discussing it earlier, and some guys are talking about going, doing a 2-stop soft. Some are even discussing doing a 3-stop soft strategy. I kind of thought a medium strategy wouldn't be a bad call. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out this week, because this track is absolutely murdering tires, and every session I've been in so far under VRS weather, it's 99 Fahrenheit track temp, and then other sessions I've been in that didn't use any specific weather, track temp was roughly 100. On top of that, you have a lot of corners, a lot of tight corners, and as you could probably tell through some of this video, I'm squealing the front quite a bit. So the tires are a limiting factor. The softs are going to die out pretty quickly. So I would definitely recommend running a couple different races, or at least spectating a few of them to kind of see what happens, as it kind of seems like the strategies are going to be up in the air. Despite how much this track is destroying the tires, I still highly advise against using the hard tires, as, again, your speed delta is going to be too much. Those things are way too slow, even if they will survive majority of this race. We'll kind of see how things play out. Ultimately, if you want to try to go for, say, a 2-stop soft strategy, be very smooth with your inputs. Don't lock your fronts up, which is extremely easy to do, especially getting into turn 1. I did it way too many times to count in testing. And also be careful with the rears. I found, especially the last 2 corners, it's really easy to burn the rears up by sliding the rear end a lot. The car likes to slide around those corners, but at the same time it'll tear your rear tires off. But that is one method for getting around this track that I didn't discuss in the Hotlap. Is there's a lot of areas here where it's advantageous to use the throttle to get the rear end to jump around a bit to get the car to corner. The downside of that is if you do it too hard or you do it too much, you'll tear these tires off. and that's going to really screw you up on your strategy. So in closing, hope you guys do find this video helpful. Unfortunately, the second week of the season is a week that I'm struggling at myself. So we'll see how things go. Next week, I believe, is Red Bull Ring, and that's usually a much better track for me. So we'll have a much better video that week. So as I said again, hope this helps somebody, and I'll see you guys out on the track.